So let's start. Right out the box, what kind of work are you looking at? Well, you're looking at quite a lot actually. The plus side though is after the first initial work with setting the Landroid up and fine-tuning it afterwards for a flawless run, you'll eventually get to a point where you can just tell Google to mow your yard and kick up your feet and relax. Depending on your lawn type and size, it can take a while though. So first thing is first, in case some of you were wondering, let me just tell you right now that this Landroid is in no way similar to those robot vacuums with LiDAR navigation and mapping. There is no mapping, no LiDAR navigation. This thing pretty much operates like a cheap $200 robot vac with a zigzag pattern for routing. And even to say that is a little generous because if you hunt for deals, you can very well get a robot vac with LiDAR navigation for $200 like I did. You can even get one for $150. Video for that vac will be in the right hand corner. The only difference between the Landroid and a cheap robot vac is the Landroid uses a guide wire to navigate your yard. Think of it as a virtual wall. Your Landroid knows exactly where to mow, so it keeps within your yard at all times, regardless if you have a fence or not. And yes, even if you have a fence, you still need to install the guide wire, otherwise the Landroid will not work. That being said, Landroid randomly roams your yard with its blade spinning to cut your lawn. This operation is effective, but not so efficient. More on that later. So the first step is to pick a spot for your base station. I chose this corner of my house because it doesn't get blasted by the sun and weather elements like the rest of the house does. I did have to prep the area because it had a slope and the base station needs to be installed on a flat and level surface. After anchoring the base station down, you then have to run the guide wire. This is a long and tedious job, especially if your lawn is coarse. The grass, sand, weeds all managed to cut up my arms, knees, legs, etc. Total time to run the guide wire around my 3,000 square foot backyard took about 3 hours. What is the guide wire? Well, it's a signal wire that connects to your base station and runs around the perimeter of your yard and back to the base station. An electrical signal is sent through the wire from the base station. When the Landroid runs over the guide wire, it senses the electrical signal and turns or backs away. Fun fact, this technology is pretty old. You can find it in strange places like Disney's Terror Tower ride. I did run out of stakes, so I had to order another pack from Amazon for $22. About 5 feet from the base station, I also ran out of guide wire, but I had some wires left over from my garage door sensors that I used with no issue. I did opt for the island boundary, which means you use the guide wire to block the Landroid from entering an area, like the area around my pool. I used it around my pool because I couldn't justify spending an extra $150 for the off-limit accessory or an extra $250 for the anti-collision system. Yes, these accessories are an extra cost and do not come with the unit. The off-limit accessory is a sensor that plugs into the bottom of the Landroid. You then get a roll of magnetic strips to place around areas you don't want the Landroid to go. When the Landroid moves over a magnetic strip, it senses it and backs or turns away. Think of it as a portable guide wire that doesn't need to be connected to your base station. This feature usually comes with most robot vacs, including my cheap $200 Nito. Again, link in the right hand corner. Alright, so now the anti-collision system. What is this? Well, the anti-collision system is a set of sensors that mount on the top of the Landroid so it can see objects and stop without bumping into them. Whether you want to spend the cash for these extra accessories is up to you. Luckily though, you can go to Home Depot and purchase more landscaping wire to use as guide wire. Now this is where your lawn comes into play. The stakes Worx gives you will work on a healthy lawn. However, if you have dead areas that are more sand than grass, this is where their stakes fail. They aren't long enough to drive deep in the ground to hold the guide wire down, so what ends up happening is the guide wire will eventually raise up, which can then get snagged and cut by the Landroid. Even if your lawn is level and flat, you can still be affected by it. A solution I found that works very well is to use tent stakes in these areas to firmly hold down the guide wire. Of course, this means an added cost, but Walmart will sell you a 6-pack for about $5. But if you have the same lawn as I do, I would recommend purchasing at least 2 packs. And remember, the guide wire tells the Landroid where to stop, so manipulate the wire as needed. For example, in this corner of the house that I chose to install the base station, there are 2 raised sprinkler heads. At first, I installed the guide wire behind the sprinkler, keeping it 10 inches away from the house. I figured maybe the Landroid would tap the sprinklers and back away. But because the sprinklers were so close to the base station, not only was the Landroid hitting them at an alarming force that can cause damage to the sprinklers, but it was also throwing off its route. In one instance, the Landroid gave up on this area and attempted to mow somewhere else. This is where manipulating the guide wire comes in handy. I moved the wire in front of the sprinklers using the included ruler to create a perimeter around the sprinkler so the Landroid moves around it, and it worked out great. So after you get the guide wire installed, you're ready to mow, right? Yes, but you're not ready to kick up your feet just yet. Again, according to your lawn type, expect a lot of guide wire cuts. I used 2 packs of Worx stakes to stake down the guide wire, and it wasn't enough to hold the wire down firmly. Because of my sandy soil, the Landroid would roll over the guide wire, putting its weight on it and causing the stakes to pop up. When that happens, it was pretty much a guaranteed wire cut. The Landroid would cut the wire, and the app would alert you that the guide wire is missing. Landroid will stop in its track once it cuts the wire, so it's easy to identify where the damage is. At this point, I've repaired the guide wire 6 times and placed a tent stake in these troubled areas to prevent further damage. Another trick is to eliminate any slack in the guide wire. If you find an area with slack, remove the stake, twist it with the guide wire attached, and place it back in the ground like so. If that doesn't work, use this trick with the tent stake. You want no slack in the guide wire. You want it as tight as possible and on the ground. My hope is that the grass will eventually grow over the guide wire to help hold it down. Another thing you can do to help prevent cuts is to raise the cutting blade. Right now I have it set to 2.5. But again, if you have a completely healthy lawn with amazing soil, I don't think you'd have this issue. Either way, expect to spend the following 2 days repairing and tweaking your guide wire. If you are completely turned away from robot lawnmowers because of the guide wire, Toro is currently working on a robot mower that uses cameras to map your lawn instead of the guide wire, similar to your high-end robot vacs. Pre-orders will start fall 2022 and will start shipping around 2023 according to Pro Tools review. No pricing available just yet, just thought I'd mention it. So what about now? Can you kick up your feet? Not yet. This next step does fall in line with testing and improving your guide wire setup, so it won't add any more delays. But basically, when testing and improving your guide wire, you will also come across other issues. For example, when testing, I found out that our trampoline proved to be a problem with the Landroid. The feet of the trampoline runs on the ground and the Landroid would attempt to go over it, but ended up always getting stuck because the hump was big enough for the Landroid to detect that it had been picked up. And one of its safety feature is to shut off when picked up, so it would automatically stop and wait for someone to intervene. A solution was to bolt 4 feet treated planks to the bottom of the legs to prevent the Landroid from trying to go in between the feet. And now the trampoline is not an issue. Originally, I was going to create an island for the trampoline using the guide wire, but we move it around our yard a lot, so it's never in the same place. And I also wanted under the trampoline to be mowed. I also knew I wouldn't have enough guide wire. So I dropped $20 on 3 8-foot planks, cut them in half, and bolted them on. Cheap and effective. Another trouble spot was the kid's slide. The Landroid would move under the slide, picking it up and getting trapped underneath. Again, it would stop and wait for someone to intervene. A solution was to put the kid's power wheel in the area and rest the bottom of the slide inside the power wheel as shown. Now, instead of the Landroid pushing itself under the slide, it hits the car and backs up. And the last issue I have, which unfortunately I don't currently have a fix for, is my soil type. Sometimes the Landroid will do a burnout and get itself stuck in a hole it has created. The Landroid would never stop trying to get out the hole, but it will alert me via the app that it's stuck. Again, unfortunately, unless I replace my sod, I don't see a solution for this in the near future. I'm just gonna have to suck it up and help the Landroid out every now and then. And lastly, of course, you need to clear your yard of toys, rocks, sticks, etc. for the Landroid. And this isn't just for the Landroid. Even when you're using a traditional lawnmower, it's a good habit before you start. If not, go watch Final Destination 4. It'll change your mind. And if that doesn't change your mind, watch this Mythbuster episode here. So it's been a couple of days and you feel like you've fine-tuned everything and have a pretty good setup that doesn't require you to babysit the Landroid. What kind of results are you looking at? And is it worth the fruit of your labor? I'd say yes. Mowing the yard is a weekly chore for some, bi-weekly for most. Bottom line is, someone has to do it. While the first initial setup is tedious and can end up costing just a little more money, these are one-time investments. Once you spend and work on the initial setup, you won't have to do it again unless you want to adjust your guide wire to cut more real estate or you move. The most you will ever have to do for Landroid afterwards is keep a clear yard and replace its cutting blade. Now you can finally kick up your feet and ask Google or Alexa to start Landroid. Worx does have a Landroid app for both Google Home and Alexa that you can enable. This allows you to start the Landroid and have it return to its dock as shown here. If that isn't enough for you, as mentioned before, the Landroid app is pretty intuitive. When you first open it, it tells you the status of your Landroid. From that page, you can start Landroid, return it to base, or pause mowing. Press on the arrow button and you switch from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth. Start edge routine, which will cut the edge beyond the guide wire. Party mode, which will put the Landroid in a hold state to prevent it from mowing. And one-time schedule. If you press on the three lines in the top left corner, you can add more Landroids, configure your lawn size, grass species, soil type, irrigation, nutrition, and set up multi-zone if you have a Landroid, for example, mowing your front yard and backyard. You have an auto schedule mode, which will give Landroid full control over mowing your lawn, but you will need to configure your lawn size first though. But this is pretty easy. You just start it and walk around the perimeter of your guide wire. You have non-work time, so for example, my rain machine is set to water my lawn on Wednesdays and Sundays, so the Landroid is set to not work on these days. And you also have rain delay, which prevents Landroid from working when it's raining. You can see a very detailed activity log for your Landroid, do a firmware update, see your Landroid statistics, and change your unit of measure to metric or imperial. But as mentioned above, there is no map of your lawn or anything of the sorts like you would see on your Robot Vac app. This leads us to our next discussion. So, Landroid is effective, your lawn will be mowed, and it will look great. Even if you have small hills in your yard, the blade automatically adjusts up and down to accommodate uneven grounds. Just keep in mind that your Landroid will be working throughout the week to mow your yard. So what would normally take you about 1 or 2 hours will take a week to complete. And that isn't bad. I mean, again, you get to sit back and relax while it does its thing. Just expect to see it often mow your yard when the battery isn't dead. If you have kids or pets that often play in your yard, this might not be ideal. They can very well get hurt. This means that the window of opportunity for play would be narrowed to when the Landroid is charging. You can schedule Landroid to cut during the night, but if it runs into any issues, no one will be available to intervene. I have 3 kids and I've managed to work around it, so it's possible, but it is something to think about. The cutting wheel is roughly the size of my hand. It has a smaller cutting path than a weed whacker. I mean, imagine cutting your lawn with a weed whacker. It'd probably take you a week. But what makes Landroid super inefficient is its cutting path. When first testing my setup, it was constantly getting stuck in the same area over and over again. Even after it would dock to charge and then continue to cut, it visited the same area again and got stuck. The funny thing is, my entire lawn clearly has areas that the Landroid didn't even touch. But this is the result of not having navigation. It's the reason why robot vacs today have some sort of navigation, so it knows where it's been and doesn't waste time visiting that area again. And mind you, you can get these features from vacs that cost as much as $200. For almost $1,000, I kinda expected some sort of navigation, not just a guide wire. I would have loved to have a map of my yard and see the areas Landroid mowed. You would also be able to put up no-go lines like what you would for your robot vac. For $1,000, you can get robot vacs that can do this and more. Now, I get it. This Landroid has to be built like a tank. It has to be dirt and waterproof, and it has to hold up to the outdoors elements like the sun and the weather. I get it. I do. As a matter of fact, the instructions say to hose it down when it's dirty, as I show here. Then that's probably where majority of the cost goes. But being so modular, I mean, why can't we just get an add-on that will give you navigation? Navigation will allow the Landroid to work much more effectively. So instead of spending the entire week mowing, it could have your yard mowed in just 1 or 2 days. That's if the battery doesn't get in the way. And that's my final issue with this Landroid. The battery it comes with sucks. It gives the Landroid about 1 hour of work time and takes about 3 hours to fully charge. This isn't a big deal, but if you want your Landroid mowing more and charging less, look to upgrade the battery pack to a 4 milliamp hour. And this concludes my review. Again, I like it. It cuts well and does what Worx promises. I haven't cut the front yard yet, but the back and front were both the same length before using the Landroid. Take a look now and you can see for yourself that the Landroid indeed works. The front yard looks untamed while the backyard looks great. I no longer have to worry about my backyard. I only have to tend to the front yard and weed whack the back. But it's going to be a tremendous help in the long run. We did have a lawn care specialist come out and cut our entire yard for $800 a year, and the idea was we pay for the Landroid now and I start cutting back the front yard, and after a year the Landroid will start to pay off for itself. My front yard isn't that big, so it would be more of a hassle to run more guide wires for the front, so for now I'm going to leave the Landroid in the back. But I will update you in a year and let you know how my plan goes. Who knows, maybe I'll get my hands on Toro's upcoming robot mower. Imagine being able to just buy the mower, have it map your yard on its own, and start cutting. That's the dream right there. All robot mowers today rely on the guide wire though, and that's because robot mowers are still new to the industry. As time goes on, we'll start to see the guide wire fade and navigation and mapping be adopted. They will be expensive at first, but just like the robot vacs, they will eventually come down in price. But until then, this works, and I can see why Landroid is voted best value robot lawnmower by PC Magazine. It's affordable and it works great. Now you can finally kick up your feet and get lazy with lawn care. My least favorite type of care. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, thumbs down work also. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.